Hey everybody, I'm Robert. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to the barn here at Apex. Today I'm sitting on the F80 M3 taxi. I want to talk to you guys a little bit about wear and tear, about maintenance. You may or may not know that we just put the third motor in this car. The car has 71,000 kilometers on it. The first motor went at 36,000 kilometers. This one went at 35,000 later, and that puts us at 71. So George and I, he's actually over here. Tom, you can show George just working away over here. George is over here working on tearing down the motor, because what we want to do is actually show you guys what went on this motor, what blew up. We're going to go ahead and make this a two-part video because we have a lot of good topics. You guys have asked about oil change intervals, brake pad intervals, brake disc intervals. You've asked about what do we do with our differentials and maintenance and things like that. And we're also going to talk about a couple other cars in the fleet, such as the M4 and things like that. This car right here is a car that we run on the Nürburgring as a taxi. It's a four-seater, bucket seats in the front, bucket seats in the back, harnesses everywhere. It's as close as you're going to get to a race car without actually racing in VLN, for example. When a lot of people ask us, $299 a lap, how does it cost $299 a lap to run this car? I would say we actually should be selling it for at least $399 when you start hearing about all of the maintenance that we have. We're going to talk about how much inventory do we have just to operate this car, whether it be wheels, differentials, etc. A lot of interesting things coming up. So I hope you guys enjoy that. First off, Tom's going to show you the car. For those of you who haven't seen it, a quick little walkthrough. And we're going to jump down with George and I guess talk maintenance. Part one is going to be talking about maintenance. Part two, which will come out tomorrow, is going to be actually the breakdown of the motor and showing you what actually failed on this second motor, and do we think it could be prevented by having a built motor, etc. Looking forward to it. So George, what do you think of the motor in terms of how it was built, and let's just say more along the lines of ease of working on? How would you feel about changing an alternator if the motor was in the car?
Well, the alternator is not terrible in situ, I don't think. I think we've done one on the M4 last year, but they don't make things easy anymore. Like everything's a struggle to like that. There we go.
But I guess they're working on getting more and more stuff in these motors and getting it in a compact space.
Exactly
right?
that. Yeah. Exactly that. So there's obviously more and more stuff, more and more sensors that they're using. I mean, if Tom filmed down on this loom down here on the floor, that's literally just a loom for the valve train. Gives you an idea of how much stuff is on these engines.
And for its time, the E30 M3 was pretty advanced, and people were like, man, ECUs and all this crap, and you know, everything that it had.
The early mass airflow meters that were adjustable.
But when you compare it now to these things, it's night and day. The E30 engine bay is like, oh yeah, unplug this, unplug that, and rip the motor out.
The E30's got one coolant temp sensor that's like nice and easy to get to. The other one for the ECU is nice and easy to get to. This, it's like probably easy to take the engine out for most of the stuff.
Here it spends you spend as much time just looking for where the spark plugs are.
Yeah, basically that. You end up having to rip half the plenum apart just to get to the spark plugs. It's crazy.
How long did it take to get the motor out?
I didn't really time it because I was kind of just taking my time and just seeing where things are going. But yeah, it was on the floor easily in a day of like halfway through stopping to do stuff with the Cooper and stuff like that. So
yeah, and then it was a matter of picking up the new motor. So from the motor coming out to the motor going back in was about 3 days, for anyone that was curious about that. 3 days from in to out, there was a little bit of messing around. The Cooper is going to have a race this week, or the end of this month, and it needed to get its DMSB certificate so that it could have that race. So George spent a little bit of time in that. But what was the biggest hiccup? I guess the biggest hiccup was that you needed to swap the control unit for the transmission.
Oh, we've still got to do it. So
okay. So where's that at?
It's in this. Well, it's part of the mechatronics unit, which is in the side of the gearbox and underneath. It's part of like.
So you actually have to open it up to get it out.
So we have to open it up to get it out. And I've never done one on this car before, so it's going to be a bit interesting. And I've spoken to a few people, and none of them have done it either.
So we're going to have more downtime swapping over the control unit for the DCT.
It has an immobilizer fault, so with this transmission ECU, it reads it, but because it's not reading it correctly, it's throwing up a immobilizer issue, which is obviously less than ideal.
So it probably just has to do with generations of the motor and transmission versus the generation of the car?
I think the engine and box that we've got in the car now is a tiny bit earlier than this one. So
okay. Yeah, well, this car was quite early. It was, you know, in 2017. It was the first new model year of that, you know, when we got it. So that would make sense.
So yeah, it's the same, but the control unit doesn't when I play ball because it's just reading different. It's easy to just swap the control units.
Got it.
It's probably cheaper as well, so it's always a good thing.
Did the new motor have coil packs on it?
Yes, it did, but our ones were brand new, so we're taking them out of this motor.
That's another interesting thing is a lot of people had asked new motor, old motor. For our use right here, we're finding out that getting a motor that is slightly used is actually better than getting a brand new motor. We're getting all of the parts and we're getting everything in the 15,000 euro range with a very low kilometer motor. I think the one that went in this had 8,500 kilometers on it. And the one that went in it last time had 12,000 kilometers. So the brand new motor went 36,000 kilometers. The one that had 12,000 went 35,000 kilometers. So you can see that between the brand new motor that was in the car when we bought it and the first used one that had 12 on it already, we didn't get any more or any less use out of it. And I think that has to do with the fact that our use is all in the Nürburgring, so we're not actually seeing wear and tear from the road affecting it. The M4, how many kilometers does the M4 have on it now?
It's like 90k now.
So the M4 rental car is at 90k. We bought the car used, but it wasn't that high when we bought it, and that motor has done a lot of work. Unfortunately, that one is on its second motor as well. It hit a curb at Versiphon, lost all of its coolant, and the motor was damaged in that regard, so we replaced it. Now, the motor, however, is well over 30,000 kilometers on the Nürburgring since then. So we have a situation where we're seeing these motors last on the Nürburgring 35 to 36,000 kilometers, and a brand new motor was already in it, and it's no improvement. We're running right around 560 horsepower on this motor. We have 4 stages, I guess, George, is it?
Yeah, 4.
4 stages. Stock is 430. I think our lowest stage is 460. Then we have one at about 490, 530, and then about 569 horsepower. Those are the 4 stages we run at. As of late, we've been running it in one of the middle stages because all we're doing is creating more torque with the higher horsepower stages. Obviously, we're getting more and more torque as we go up, and the car runs really well in the low 500s, in my opinion.
Yeah, the high 400s, low 5s is I think is best for this car.
It's a happy point for
medium,
it.
Yeah.
You can drive it very smoothly and you can be quick with it, but it's also not destroying the drivetrain and everything like that. So I figured it would be neat to show you guys the turbos, and in fact we haven't done any cleaning on the turbo, so this is exactly how it came off of the car. So this is again 36,000 kilometers of use. You can see there's no oil built up inside, so that's actually nice to see that the turbo seals, or the oil seals and everything, are intact. So we'll actually go ahead and keep these turbos as backups just in case the situation arises that we need to go ahead and replace them. So you can see this is the aftmost turbo as well, and it also looks pretty clean.
Yeah, they look decent.
Yeah, I mean, I was playing around with everything, and everything moves nicely, and again, no oil inside the actual inlet or outlet, so that's really positive.
There's no lateral movement in the shaft either.
It's really nice.
A tiny bit side to side, that's it.
We actually also have 2 brand new turbos, so we have an extensive selection of parts, I guess, now in backup for this car, from wheels to wheel barrels to turbos to I guess now backup transmission. We got an entire differential set up ready to go. 2 used turbos, 2 brand new turbos. What else do you got? Brake discs for ever?
Soon to have Uniball kits as well.
Okay.
Yeah, we've probably got enough to almost build another car.
Yeah, so the parts supply that we have to run this car is also quite interesting. I would say it's easily over 100,000 euro worth of parts that we have just for this car alone. And that's not even counting just the wheels, because obviously the wheels alone are quite expensive. But
I mean, obviously it's not always necessary to keep all the parts, but when you're running it as a taxi and we get to situations like last year with the drive shaft, remember?
Yep.
And no one could get a drive shaft because it was 9 o'clock on a Saturday night. We couldn't get a shaft in time, so we had to wait till Sunday morning. 10 o'clock, Sherma opened, and it was like the taxi was down. We missed about 10 laps.
Yeah, and so you think about it, you say, okay, well, a drive shaft is a little over 1,000 euro, I guess. And if you've got a drive shaft and you need it and you can't get it and you cancel 10 laps, that's in this car right now about 3,000 euro worth of laps that you cancel because you didn't have a 1,000 euro part in stock.
Yep.
So you end up finding that we have a Drexler differential in stock. All these things really add up. Another one that we're looking at is, and I don't have a lot of experience with them, I've not done it before, The clutches, we're looking at getting a set of clutches in stock in case we need something. Who's the manufacturer on those? Do you
So
know?
they do, there's a few aftermarket ones with Dodson.
And those are coming from Atomic?
They'll come from Atomic,
Okay.
yeah.
So Atomic will have those in stock, and we'll actually get them and have them on the shelf so that we can go ahead and replace the clutches if needed. That was one of the problems that we had with this car over the 71,000 kilometers, is occasionally we would get a gearbox error, and it seemed as if the clutch packs were overheating, and that might be as they were starting to wear down and starting to slip a little bit, we were getting issues with the clutch packs. So now that was why we went with the new transmission, was we wanted something that had fresh clutch packs and didn't have a problem with that. Yeah, something else that's interesting that a lot of people have been asking about, George, is oil changes, and I guess just the general maintenance on the taxi, the basic stuff we do. I think a typical M3 gets its oil changed once a year. Obviously, I think, M fanatics are maybe a little bit more cautious about their car and want to go back to maybe if it's 10,000 kilometers or 15,000 kilometers, but we hold a little bit more strict time schedule. And why don't you go ahead and tell people when you're changing the actual engine oil?
So normally engine oil, we're changing every 3,000 kilometers, which is like you say 150-ish laps. It's normally like every second set of brake pads.
Okay.
So brake pads will do 80, 90 laps, maybe 100 if it's a bit slower pace, if David's not driving. And yeah, so we kind of just gauge it by that normally. So every second set of brake pads, we'll do brake fluid and engine oil.
Yeah, I've been seeing when I monitor stuff that the reality is it averages in the 75 to 80 range. If I'm driving, then maybe it'll go to 100.
Yeah, I mean, it's
the harder you push,
of course,
the faster you are, then the more you're going to wear down, right?
Of course. I mean, when you're really pushing, race drivers are a different breed, aren't they?
Yep.
Race drivers don't know what slow is.
Yeah, they're like,
they know fast or nothing. I mean, Tim is probably one of the most conservative drivers I think we've ever had and ever seen.
We had to work on Tim a while though.
Yeah, but he looks after the car. He can make the GT2 tyres last ages.
Yeah, he can.
So that's good. Like that's what's a good balance. But obviously it depends.
Another interesting one is the basically the transmission fluid and everything, right?
So yeah, transmission fluid is normally in this car. You can feel it. You can feel when the transmission fluid is starting to get a little bit old.
You also get warnings in the dash when things are starting to go awry.
Exactly. Well. It comes up with a gearbox overheating for clutches overheating. Now, obviously, at the moment, we have got the slight issue with the clutches slipping a little bit. Well, not anymore because we've readapted them and run less power. So,
well, now we don't because we got the new transmission.
Well, yeah, now not. Now we can go back to normal. But yeah, that's obviously the dust from the clutches as they slip.
Yeah, it was
goes
basically
into the transmission oil, contaminates
right?
the oil really quick, and then the oil degrades. So
yeah, we were getting to points where because we didn't have a solution for the clutches at the moment, because we knew, and when we got the taxi license back, even George said, okay, well, I guess we're waiting for the M3 motor to blow up.
It's all a ticking time bomb.
And even Tim wrote me, he goes, Robert, do you think it's going to go at 35,000 again? And obviously it did. So we all knew that this motor was about to go. So we said, okay, well, we're going to work with the clutches and just do regular flushes, because it was still working perfectly. We just had to stay on top of it.
Exactly.
So we made this clutch pack and the transmission go until the motor said, okay, it's time to go. And that's why we were able to, when the motor went, within a couple of days, we had the motor out, had the new motor ready to go back in. But yeah, it turned into a maintenance thing where we were constantly replacing that fluid just to keep the transmission happy, I would say. How often are you swapping out the brake fluid?
Every second pad change.
Every second pad change.
Yeah.
So are you doing that with the oil, or are you doing opposite the oil?
So we do like a mini
service.
service every time the second pad change. It's a good indicator because the pads are very consistent.
Yeah, the pads are very consistent.
Very consistent thing to wear.
And this also goes to show that if, let's just say we took the car to the Essen Motor Show one year, or if the car does some kind of media thing where it gets 100 laps or 100 kilometers put on it, or who knows, maybe it runs down to my house for a week of storage because it's N24, and that ends up being 350 kilometers round trip on it, that wouldn't be consistent on the wear and tear of the car.
I mean, it's mostly Autobahn, so it's like
it wouldn't
nothing.
Even count. So we don't necessarily go based on the kilometers of the car. We go on something like the brake pads. For a car that's used on the track, you know exactly how much use it had based on the brake pads.
Plus, when we have to do our mileage logs on all the cars, so as an indicator, whenever I do, say, an oil change or something on the car, I log it. I obviously road test the car after. I log it on that. So
It's
I
also
can go back on our logs and check what kilometers the car
and you
was
can
on
also
stuff.
find if something's going wrong if you're having to maintain something more often. So every change or every, I would say, brake pad change, oil change, fluid change, and part changes. Our Polo, the Volkswagen Polo that we have, would always get bent rear axles, right?
Yep.
We can go and see how long a rear axle is lasting on a Polo, and that's just because it's I don't want to say I-beam, but it's a stamped, basically a stamped beam that Volkswagen uses as the rear axle on this, and that's become almost a wear item. And a lot of you guys have asked, because I post on social media that we're bringing the Golf back into play. A lot of you guys have asked, why are you guys putting the Golf back in? You love the Polo. I do love the Polo, and George tells me that he thinks he can make the Golf drive like the Polo. So I'm going to go with him on that, but he also thinks that the Golf is going to be more robust for you guys driving it and for us maintaining it because it's got a better DCT,
Yep.
it's got a better, front hubs are stronger, the wheel bearings are stronger.
That's the thing is the Polo wasn't designed on a track. And that's,
For only track
it
use.
shows after a few thousand kilometres, like we got to what did we get to before the first transmission was replaced? 41k.
That's in the mid-30s, yeah.
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 So, I mean, that shows
Right.
kind of how that works, you know, how the Polo is not really designed for it, whereas the transmission on the Golf is still the same transmission.
Right. Well, I think that this has kind of turned into a whole discussion about reliability and what we maintenance and everything, what we do on the track. It might be getting into a longer video, so I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and cut this here, and we're going to now actually focus on tearing the motor down so George can get to work without me interrupting him, and we'll catch you guys, I guess, tomorrow to actually talk about what's happened in this motor.